This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, I have director Kevin R. Phipps. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, you got it right.
Phipps, okay.
I always tell people only lawyers usually get that right, so that's a good job.
Okay. And Sean Richards, who's also an actor, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, fantastic. You know, it's funny because I know you two have got this memorable documentary coming up on Friday the 13th, Part 3, and Richard Brooker.
I was told by my parents, my mom and stepdad, I couldn't watch these from a young age when I witnessed them, literally going through the roof, being scared, spying on one night behind a chair, seeing them watch Part 1. So that got my interest right away, and then they told me I couldn't watch them, and which only fueled my interest. and then, I was that kind of kid. No, I can't do that? Okay, well, now I really want to do it. Yeah, definitely. And so I go to my dad's every weekend and talk him into it, running on Betamax.
Well, Kevin, which was your first one that you've seen?
Oh, gosh, I think it was, I'm going to misquote this, but Maximum Overdrive, is that what it was? With the giant, what is that, the giant truck that kills people, the giant semi-truck.
Did you hang your head in shame?
Yeah, no, I know. Well, it was funny because I was a kid, and my mom was a little odd in that way. She was like, "Come here, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of horror movies." So it was a little different than your guys' parents. My mom's like, "Here, check this out." So and then I was screaming underneath the counter for like a half an hour. I'm like, "Why?" So, but then as I hit like 13, I started becoming obsessed with horror films. I started watching, and then I hit my favorite, which was Pinhead and Hellraiser. And then I started watching all the icons. So yeah.
What was your introductory to the Friday the 13th franchise?
Mine personally, believe it or not, was not until number 7. I went to the theater all by myself, which was probably not a good idea. And I was sitting there watching it, and I remember the girl in the tent, and she was naked, of course. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" and then I remember Jason zipping her up or whatever and slamming her against a tree, and I was like, "Oh my god, that was crazy." And then I had to go back and watch all the others. It's
funny because my story with Part 7 is that I went with my older brother to see that, and neither one of us were 18. He would have been 17, but neither one of us were 18, but somehow we got in and we saw that in the theater.
Yeah, that was back when they didn't check your ID too much when you were under 17.
Well, you two have got a documentary project on Friday the 13th, Part 3. Of course, was the first one shot in 3D. And have either of you seen it in 3D? Because I have not.
I have not. It's on my bucket list. I've heard great things about it in 3D. And at the beginning of this year, there was a Friday the 13th in January, and it being 35th anniversary year for Part 3, they had a screening on Friday, January 13th, and so I showed up to pass out some leaflets for the documentary or whatever, and Larry Zerner was there, who was Shelley in Part 3, and he was also part of the documentary, and we got to talking a little bit, and it was funny because we were sitting at the front there, and right before the screening, he's like, "What? Nobody's gonna sit by me?" And I just kind of like 5-10 seconds go by. Nobody says anything. I'm like, "I'll sit with you, Larry." So we sit. He's like, "Okay, thanks." So we ended up watching Part 3, and that's the first time I ever saw it on the big screen, albeit it wasn't in 3D. But Larry, this was a late screening. I mean, it started at like midnight on the night of Friday, January 13th. And he says to me before it starts, he says, "Hey, Sean, this is way past my bedtime. I'm probably not going to make it through this. So if I start snoring, just nudge me. And I was like, sure, Larry, absolutely. And he's like, so the movie starts, and the stingers and the music is so loud. Like, the voices were good, but the music was so loud. And about 15 minutes in, I said, Larry, I don't think you're going to be falling asleep during this movie. And he's like, I think you're right. And and he made it through the whole movie, and we ended up watching it, and he was sharing memories of the production when he was shooting it and talking about fun stuff and what really scared me about it as a kid. I mean, it was a great viewing experience. That was terrific fun to watch it that way. And but yeah, no, I totally want to see it in 3D, and I was hoping that was going to happen for the 35th anniversary year, but there was whispers of it, but it didn't pan out. I don't know. What about you, Kev? Have you seen it in 3D?
No, I mean, I tried the whole, we have that newer smart TV where you can change it to 3D, and it came with glasses, and I tried that, but I don't think it was as effective as it could have been, especially with all the little fun things where people jab at the screen with instruments and the yo-yos and stuff like that. But yeah, no, I didn't get a chance to see it in 3D either.
Wow. Yeah. So Catherine Parks did not show up to sit by Larry.
Well, we tried. We wanted to get Catherine, but we couldn't get the contact info. We dug for it, but
Well, she does still have his wallet, doesn't she?
Yeah, you're right. She does. Yeah, hanging out in the dark, muddy pond.
Well, Friday the 13th Part 3, like, I've done interviews from most of them, And Friday the 13th Part 3, the only interview I've done from that right now is David Catum's, of course, who played Chuck, and he looks nothing like that now.
He's a good guy.
David is awesome. David's interview, the guy's hilarious. I mean, he's.
Yeah.
You remember that interview, Kevin? I mean, between questions, I could hardly keep it together. I'm like, he's a very funny guy. He's a very funny man, but that makes sense. He's a comedian. It was. He's totally.
Yeah, he had that Tommy Chong thing going for him in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He had mentioned that they were, we talked about that a little bit too, and he had mentioned how they wanted like a kind of a male-female Cheech and Chong for the film, like to kind of favor those, and a Hispanic lady, and then they got Rachel Howard, and so I guess that was the idea, but that's fun because there's no other hippies in the series.
No.
I mean, he's the he's the breadwinner for that. It was a very interesting mix of characters for Part 3. I mean, you got the counselor types from Parts 1 and 2, and then you got this wild bunch from Part 3. It was great, totally.
You got Paul Crackgad, of course.
Yeah.
Yep. Paul, I guess, keeps himself in really good shape, and I was told that by Mike Guttridge, and he wasn't kidding. I guess Paul's quite a nutritionist.
Yes, Paul is healthier than I'll probably ever be, even if I dedicated the rest of my life to being as healthy as I can be.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yep. Well, let's talk about Richard Brooker. So far, the only Jason actor I've had on my show is Ted White, and I think Ted White was an incredible Jason. I loved Ted White, and I also really loved Richard Brooker as well. I have to keep catching myself because I've called him Richard Brooker for years, and finally it was David Catum that corrected me on that, and I'm like, why was I calling him Richard Brooker? It was Mr. Richard Brooker. And I don't know why I called him that, but I know you two have known him. So what was he like?
I would say, Richard was a really fun guy, and he really was a very social person. he loved to interact with the fans and people in general and share stories. He loved a good time. I would say, in a lot of ways, like Richard is the epitome of class, in that I'd say class in definition of, you could be arrogant or uppity or whatever, because he was the first Jason to establish that, what we know to be that iconic look now. So he could have just been that guy, but he absolutely wasn't that guy. So if you could be arrogant or uppity and you choose not to, that's to me like a definition of class. He was just a down to earth, fun everyday guy, and he's like, it was a job. And when you'd meet him, he'd do pictures with you and sign autographs, but he was interested to know about how you're doing.
Yeah. Did you two both meet him?
I personally have not. I pretty much lived through Sean here, learning about him, and then through the other people's interviews and fans and stuff like that. So, and I've heard nothing but just wonderful things about him.
Yeah. Oh, Sean, how did you meet him?
I had originally met him. It was in Orlando, 2006, and it was like a convention in Florida. And I used to live over in the Tampa St. Pete area for about 6 years. So I heard he was going to be there, and actually the year before they had this big 25th anniversary thing for Friday the 13th in 2005, and they had all these people from the series at Hollywood and Highland, and there was Richard's co-stars, but Richard wasn't there, and so I felt like a void when I got to meet the Friday alumni when I did get to meet Richard. But so I heard he was over there in Orlando, and this was a really weird, like, kind of a mishmash of characters at this thing. I mean, you had Richard was there, and Tony Moran from Halloween, and then Robert Englund, and that's actually George Romero was at that as well, and that's where I met George, who just passed on. He was a terrific person. But then you had this other mix of people, Peter Mayhew, who was Chewbacca, and the Three's Company stars, and I was like, and David Carradine was there, and I met David, and then 6 months later, David was gone. So I met Richard, and he wasn't in the greatest mood that day, and I had done some set video photography of visiting the locale of Part 3 and was sharing that with him, and he didn't really seem interested. And I was like, oh, okay, well, never mind about that. And then I brought the mask, and I had some ideas for pictures. He's like, no, well, you can just get a picture together. That's fine. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, oh, wow. So it was kind of a little bit disheartening. Then I saw him a couple months later at this other event, and I was passing by his table, and I had met who I had met for the day, and I was kind of just wandering around. And I was looking at the pictures on his table, and, they were really great from Part 3. And I looked up at him, and he's like, hey, do I know you? You look very familiar to me. Do I know you?
Wow.
I never forget a face. And I was like, yeah, we met a couple months ago. He was like, a couple months ago? I was like, that wasn't that wasn't Orlando, was it? And I was like, yeah. He was like, you know what? I'm really sorry about that day. I'm from England. I was jet lagged. I did not feel well. I had a commitment, but I shouldn't have been there in that state of mind. I wasn't feeling good. And I'm truly sorry about that. And I was taken aback by that. I was like, wow. I was like, that was very cool. That was a true class right there, and a sign of character that really made an impact on me. And I never forgot that. And then he's like, hey, you want to get a picture together? And I was like, Sure, Richard, that sounds great. And that's the picture of Richard and I on the project page.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And then there was a party later that night, and we ended up hanging out and mingling and talking about life stuff, and it was really great. And a couple months later, I was at this other thing, and he would happen to be there, and kind of came up and tapped me on the shoulder, and was like, "Hey, man, how you been?" I was like, "Hey, good, Richard. How you been?" He's like, "Good, good." He was signing and stuff like that for the day, and I was like, "Hey, after I'm done for the day, let's go grab a drink in the bar." So we did.
Wow.
And talked for another 20 minutes or so, and just everyday stuff. And he's like, "Hey, man, I hate to cut out, but got to make an appearance over here." And he's like, "I understand, Richard." He's like, "Hey, it's great to see you. Take care." I was like, "You too." And that's the last time I saw him.
Oh, wow. And of course, this documentary, unfortunately, there was a big fire at that location that took the cabin down. What was April of 2006, I think it said. And that cabin, that beautiful spiral staircase, and I guess the barn is still standing. Is that right?
To my knowledge, the barn is still standing. I've not heard any different than that. But yeah, there's a lot of structures from this film that are gone. So it's kind of, it was first and foremost made in memoriam to Richard,
mm-hmm.
and his portrayal of the character with that look for the first time, and but it was also kind of a dual memoriam ship because the cabin's gone, and there's a lot of other things from this film that just are gone. But I guess that unfortunately happens with time and the passing of time, and things change and fade and disappear.
Is David Catum's little outhouse still there that he got shook up in?
Actually, when I visited there, it had been moved. I guess it was on the property somewhere else, or maybe they used it in, maybe further away into it in a different production.
Now, this project, how did you and Kevin Phipps come together to do this project?
Oh, Kevin, you want to tell that?
Like all great stories, it started with alcohol. No. No, we met through an exclusive friend, my girlfriend, his friend, and you just moved over here, or you moved over to Arizona, didn't you, Sean?
Yeah, I had relocated to the Phoenix area. It was Gilbert, and I was trying to get going out west, and I don't know. I'm from Indiana, and I've lived 30 of my years there, and I was just kind of done with the winters and living in Indiana. So I moved back from Florida, and then I spent 5 years in Indiana, and I was wanting to go west. So yeah, I ended up there. Took off a couple days after Christmas 2013 to the Phoenix area, and got introduced through a girl that I was friends with, whose sister happens to be Kevin's girlfriend.
Okay.
Yeah. And I believe it was New Year's Eve, right? And we all went out, and we took pity on this tall, handsome guy. No, I'm just kidding. And we took him to one of our New Year's parties that our friends was having, and him and I got to talking a lot. And Shannon, who's one of the small producers on the side, she had said, "Hey, Sean's trying to do this Friday the 13th documentary type thing," and he told me all about it, and we got to rapping about it, and finally, like all good contracts, we signed when we were drunk. No, I'm just kidding. And we just got to working on it. We became really good, close friends in the process. So there you go.
Got to do a special shout out to Shannon, because she was really cool in putting this interview together, and she was the one that responded to me.
Yeah, Shannon's great. She's done a lot of great work for this, and she's put in a lot of awesome effort and got some really, she did some really great, creative, artistic stuff. That one photo that's on the project page of Dick Weand with the Roy mask, the imposter Jason, who's in the documentary, was a really good friend of Richard's and shared some wonderful memories during the interview. Well, after the interview, I had the Roy mask for his interview, you know, just kind of propped on a stick by him while he was talking, and he did some posing with the mask, and then one day she just sent it at work to me, and created this like bluish look with putting the Friday the 13th Part 3 Memorium documentary. That was definitely the highlight of my day. That day, I was like, wow, that's really cool looking. So when I've been promoting for or putting the word out for the premiere over the last month or so, that was the shot I used and created a post, and Dick's going to be with us that night, Dick Weand, for the premiere, and he's a great one. And Shannon, you know, like I say, she's really really helped out a lot. Can't say enough.
Okay, all right. Well, I noticed like some of the people in this documentary are not strictly from Part 3. I mean, Adrienne King is also in this documentary. So how did she come to be part of this, besides being in Part 1?
Well, Kev, you want me to tackle that?
Yeah, you tackle that
one. Yeah, actually, Adrienne King and Harry Manfredini were the two original supporters for this.
Okay.
Because I was connected with Adrienne on Facebook, and I had met Harry at the 25th, and Adrienne was there too. And just a tremendous guy, a really, really nice guy, and fun, and has funny stories, and he's in the documentary too.
Yeah.
And so they were both kind of putting the word out on this. And then, and then there, to what you said, there's people in this that aren't in Part 3. If they're not in Part 3, it's because they were Richard's friends.
Okay.
And in offering that part of the documentary. So Adrienne was sharing about it on her page, and then we talked a little bit, and you know, she's like, well, if you need me for anything, just let me know, and so we talked and went back and forth, and we tried to arrange an interview, and it was just a timing scheduling thing, and it was hard to nail that down. And we did, and she shared a really wonderful story about Richard, and that is a testament to his character. The thing about it is you know, her interview and Caroline Williams and, you know, Dick Weand and everybody that worked with him in Part 3. What's really interesting about all these interviews is that they're very worldly and, you know, creating this complete story. Like, no two interviewees had the same thing to share. It was, you know, and you kind of wonder about that. You know, I was kind of, one of the things that was always in the back of my head going through the process of making a documentary was, well, you know, especially with the Part 3 cast members, are they all going to have the same things to share? And it's really funny because no two people had the same things to share in this. They all had different stories to tell and different things to add, and made it, you know, about Richard, about the production in Part 3. They made it a complete, fun backstory adventure in the telling of Richard Brooker's journey when he was here. So, yeah.
Now, Caroline Williams, of course, was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, if I remember correctly. Now, I don't know too much of the backstory here. Richard must have worked in a film with her, right?
No, she's one of the ones that I was mentioning. If they're not co-stars of his, then they were friends of Richard's.
Oh, okay.
So she's on board as a friend of Richard's, sharing about Richard because they were friends.
Okay.
Her and producer Eric Brandon was one of his best friends. He's in this, Adrian was one of his friends. Harry Manfredini, one of his friends. C.J. Graham was one of his friends. Who's Jason from Part 6.
Yep.
Dick Weand, and from Roy from Part 5. And then we got his cousin as well, Claire Brooker Milligan, who offered a terrific story from the 1970s.
Okay.
About Richard. So yeah, and then a few other people too that are on board as well, telling the story of what happened the night of the cabin fire, and then we went, and that was one of the first things we did on this, was to get our facts straight. And we found that the arson detective who had wrote a book about his cases throughout his career, and the cabin fire was one of those cases. So we based the script on what he shared.
Well, how long did it take you two to do this documentary?
Oh, God.
Kevin?
I think it's been about, what's it been, about 2.5 years? 2 years? 2.5 years?
Well, I got the idea for it in April 2013, because it's like the day that I heard Richard pass. I think it was a friend of mine had just shared it like that day, and I went home that night. It bummed me out. I was like,
Yep.
It was very sudden. He was 58. That's not, in today's terms, you can live a pretty long life.
Yep.
That's not a long life. And so I was bummed. And, and then I went home that evening after work, and I was just randomly watching TV in Hell's Kitchen. Like, it was on in the background, and I was just talking with my neighbor, and I noticed that right after the credits there, it said for Richard Brooker, and it said 1954 to 2013, and I was like, oh, wow. So, I was thinking that day that, because I'd visited the set prior to the fire,
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted to share my set video photography with the fans that can't visit the set the way it was, for current and future fans, and dedicate it to Richard. And that was the beginning idea. So, I had met some guys, and I was living in Indianapolis at the time, and they were doing a lot of commercial video and this and that, and they were going to try and work it in between their stuff, and it just didn't pan out. And then I ended up relocating to Arizona a couple days after Christmas. I met Kevin. Ian pitched the idea to him, and it was he seemed interested. I was like, cool. So we started working on it, and about March or so, I he's like, well, we need a script, and I was like, oh, okay, we need more than, the videos and photography are nice, but we need more than that. And I was like, okay, I'll work on a script. So created script for kind of narration. I think, well, I guess what will we talk about, about this? So I guess we talk about Part 3. And what else we got to talk about? Well, it's in memoriam to Richard, so I had to find out some stuff about Richard.
Mm-hmm.
Because, at that point, I knew he was a good guy, and I wanted to make a tribute. And, and then throughout these interviews, that just kind of throughout the years, it's only confirmed that, what I knew of him, that he was a good guy, and his stories the stories about him are pretty fantastical. I mean, like, some of the stories have been shared on this, I'm like, really? He did what? And, he created what? And, it's been a really fun discovery going through these interviews. I had no idea. So, yeah, it really started to, we did the filming in 2013, and then, you kind of do something, and then you kind of hit a bump, and then there was a delay, and you'd be working and trying to reach out to people, and then somebody else would come on board, and that first person we got was Paul in April of 2013, and or August of 2013, and he seemed interested, and we worked with him on the voiceover for the script that was written, and then we shot the intro, extra, or outro, And then there was another kind of delay, and I was like, okay, but we kept working, kept like, come check this out, this is our project, check it out. So people would just kind of like filter in, and then we get to a point where we think we were done, we were complete, and then somebody else would come, like, okay, so I'm interested, hand up here, I'm interested. I'm like, oh, okay. So we get that interview. So it kind of just, but everybody that kept coming on board is like, yeah, we'd love to hear what they have to say. So it kind of kept, pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and then so it really, started gaining steam. Especially after Paul. And Paul, we were really grateful to him. He put out in a good word for us with his co-stars, who are still keep in touch. And we got some great interviews from Larry and David and Tracy. And so yeah, it's roughly, I'd say, the idea started around 4.5 years ago, but it didn't really start like gaining actual steam until after I met Kevin, and that's and that started in mid 2014.
And of course,
around there.
Paul is seen talking in front of the convenience store too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah, we
really?
did drive up, far up, didn't we, Sean?
Yeah, well, we just like that because of the scenery. Really? That's
Yeah.
That's really what that is? No, I'm just kidding. I'm messing with you. That's one of the lone still standing structures for that film.
yeah.
The cabins. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Unfortunately,
and we had to get that quick because we had like 45 minutes of light left, and we had to run up there up the side of the mountain and throw him in front, and he came out really professional and did the intro and then did the outro, and then we were done. We had to run away before the light was on.
Totally.
Steve,
it's like we were working that day with the voiceover, and then we got the golden hour, and then we got to cut out in the voiceover. And we drove up there and got that, and it's like I remember like for the outro, it's like literally going through the stuff on for editing it together. Like the very last take that we got that was the winner for the outro take, because the take right after that is too dark, and so we were totally lucky that way.
Did you go in the store?
Actually, we did. We did for like a split second because there was a lot of people out there. I mean, if you remember, they were the little kids were playing, and we didn't like fully go in, but we peeked in for a second, and it was nice to talk to them for a second. But yeah, they were like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're shooting this and this and this." And like, "Oh, we've heard about that."
So Edna was not complaining to Harold?
Actually, that's at that was a structure that we were initially thinking about doing, that their convenience store in the beginning, because there's a brick facade that is still there that was in the film. That's an indicator, because that locale for their convenience store was kind of a big question mark for years. And then a person reached out to me that did photography at that locale and said, "Oh yeah, I found it." And I was like, "Oh really?" And so that was the original place we were trying to get for Paul's intro outro with that brick facade, but the road was closed that day, and we were going up there and we're like, "Oh shit!" So we had to take a minute and regroup here. It was like, what are we gonna do now? And I turned to Kevin, and Kevin, what are we gonna do? he's like, because we're not gonna, it wasn't like right next door for the gas station. It was, so I don't know. It's like we're gonna have to hustle. We're gonna have to make a run for it if we're gonna try and get it, because we were already in golden hour, I think then, right, Kevin?
And that's when you're like, I think we have time. We kept looking at the clocks, and I have a nice app that tells you when the sun's going down, and I was like, okay, go.
Yeah, and that was I went, and I think Kevin can attest to this. I went as fast as possible without, and it was a really twisting, turning drive. Like, there's a lot of curves and corners and sharp. I mean, that was a crazy drive. I was like, I got to get us there. It's a goal. I got to do it. We got to make this happen. So yeah, that was a drive. And Paul's like following behind us, and he's like, he's probably thinking, what the hell is wrong with these guys? Why are they driving? So
Yeah, we were afraid he was going to think we were crazy.
Yeah, but we had to get the light. We had to get there, and we were on the clock. It was that was very that was a goal. That was a stress pressure goal for sure.
So the completed film, like that's being premiered out, you say this weekend, you say?
And it's a week from Friday.
A week from Friday. How are you guys feeling about it? You nervous?
I'm pretty. I don't know about Sean. I'm pretty damn excited.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the premiere. I mean, we're doing this. We did this project for what I believe is all the right reasons. Mm-hmm. To do a project like this. And we want to do it the right way. And we grew up with these movies in the 80s.
Yep.
So, a kid from the 80s isn't a horror 80s fan. So yeah, it was really cool. And I think a lot of filmmakers, are fans. That's why they pursue it. That's why they are, they fall in love with it. Or whatever films they're fans of. I remember once hearing about John Carpenter's backstory about going to the theater with his dad when he was a kid in the 1950s, and just being awestruck by this one particular movie he saw. And for me, I had a very similar experience. I was 5 years old. I had seen E.T. in the theater, and according to my dad, I made him take me to see it 5 times. And I don't remember that, but it's cool to pursue that, and you have a passion for it, and then to meet these people behind these films that you grew up with as a kid, and just discover they're just wonderfully nice people, and it's really fantastic. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, I got a question for both of you about part 3. Between the two of you, which is your favorite kill?
From part 3 specifically?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you the eyeball smashing Paul Crack's face guy?
I think that would probably take the winner if I saw it in 3D. I think that you can't beat that one in 3D. But because I've only seen it on flat 2D format my whole life, I think I would have to agree with Richard on this one. Somebody asked him that question once, and he said the guy walking on his hands.
Yeah.
That was split in half.
Yeah, that one. That's a trip. It's just like, oh my God, like, that's the wow. For me, that's the wow death scene of the whole movie.
It's funny you say that. Peter M. Bracke said he couldn't nail down Jeffrey Rogers for an interview for his book, and he said that might be something you might want to try. And I've tried to reach out to Jeffrey Rogers, and I found somebody I thought looked like him. It turned out to be, because I heard he was in the medical profession now, and I got an email back from this guy who says, "Nope, I'm not him, but not to worry, I get this a lot." Do you have a yeah?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you have a favorite kill in the entire series? Did you have one that you liked more than that kill?
It's kind of I don't know. Well, Kevin, what about you?
Since it was my first one, I still like the sleeping bag. against the grave.
Yeah, the sleeping bag, and that's the thing too. Is I talked with Kane Hodder. We had a beer after a convention in April, and I talked to him about the project he was considering as well. But I think he just got busy with work, and he had mentioned somebody asked him that once, and that's his favorite kill. Sleeping bag.
That's awesome.
But for me, I never really thought of it like that. And as far as what's your favorite one, the Kevin Bacon one was, and that's not even Jason, so I don't know if that counts. But that one was like, wow, like. And the backstory behind that from Savini and his sidekick Tasos Stavrakis, who were under the bed doing that. But Jason wise, well, I'd have to give a shout out to C.J. Graham on this and say the one that really got to me as a kid, like I couldn't watch it. It like really bothered me.
Yeah.
I'd watch it every time it happened. I don't know what it was. It was the girl that got her head twisted off, and then later in the movie, it's really strange. It's like looking back at like the parts that really bothered me about these movies as a kid. But like when that girl opened the cop car door and the head like rolls out, like I couldn't watch that as a kid. I couldn't watch her head roll out of the car, and that just really got to me. But yeah, but there was other things too, and this is one of the things I talked about Larry when we screened it earlier this year. Is like I told him that one of the parts that bothered me the most as a kid weren't the parts when Jason popped out. It was the anticipatory parts that they kind of psyched you out. They kind of like were messing with you, like when you'd see like the barn door swaying in the breeze, in part 3, and it's like, and then you hear the and then I was like, oh my God, and that really bothered me, but nothing happened. It was just like it was messing with us. Yeah. And it was like the psychological. I guess that's the psychological part that was really. So that was the stuff that really got to me. But yeah, definitely the part 3, the guy walking on his hands that was messed up. That was and the girl's car, the head rolling out of the car, the cop car. That was, I couldn't watch that for a long time as a kid. That I just finally I just couldn't do it. Didn't bother my cousin. My cousin was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I had the pillow in front of my face. I was like, "Come on." Yeah.
Ironically, one of the most gruesome ones for me is part 4 on actual Jason himself.
Yep.
Towards Jason's death really messed with me. I was like, "Oh, nasty."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when they initially killed him off.
Yeah.
Before they start bringing him back to life.
Yeah. Zombie Jason.
I'm actually surprised they haven't done one with Jason in winter, where people come. Yeah, like that, like going to the camp during the winter time. You imagine Jason breaking out of the lake when it's covered in ice, or something like that.
That sounds like a terrific idea.
Yeah,
yep.
That's a very ironic idea.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, how cool would he look on the the snow backdrop? I mean, he's already been to space and to hell and back, and
yep.
What about does he take a break in the off season or what?
Now, Kevin, you're into directing, and I know you got a film that you're working on right now called Grief. Is that right?
Yeah, it's actually almost finished in post-production sound.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be a phenomenal psychological thriller. It's about a young lady who goes through a very traumatic event and gets split personality disorder, and her personality convinces her to kill herself. And when she does that, the rest of the movie is about how it affects her 5 family and friends according to the 5 layers of grief, both psychologically and organically, physically. It's going to be pretty interesting. So far, the early reviews have been one radio announcer said that he was disturbed for a couple weeks, so I'm glad about that.
When's that coming out?
We're hoping to have it done by January of next year. So.
Okay, yeah, I looked you up and I noticed that credit. Now, did you ever think, because you did this documentary and you get to, I'm seeing like a Mike Guttridge thing here where you get to work with some of these, this documentary, interviewing some of the cast members. You ever think that maybe you can get some of them in one of your movies?
We've actually talked a few times. Paul Kraka and I have talked a bit because we became friends. He's such a great guy. Yeah, actually, a few of us wanted to work together on another film. Hopefully, obviously a narrative type of film. So yeah, I hope so. That'd be great.
And I know, Sean, I looked you up, and I forget the name of this movie, but I know it's about a womanizer who gets punished and gets turned into a woman.
Well, that's a documentary on Sean. Just kidding.
But he's here all weekend, folks. Yeah, that was interesting. It was it was the first thing I was in after I moved out to the LA area. It's kind of played a book release party patron or high society patron or whatever in this sequence, or this guy who had wrote this book about the art of picking up women, and he was a womanizer. One day wakes up as a woman. Now he knows how it is to get dealt all that. So that was a really turnabout is fair play kind of fun movie called The Sex Trip. And yeah, it was hilarious. Went and saw it the premiere. A lot of funny stuff in that movie. I think it was a Anthony Cohen movie. But yeah, totally. It was a good writing. It was funny. It was absolutely funny. It was like it reminded me of the movie I saw when I was a kid with
just one of the guys.
Not that one. It was Role Reversal. Was like kind of like
Like
Vice
Switched.
Versa, that was Vice Versa with Judge Reinhold, and I think it was Fred Savage, the father and the son, kind of switch. They change overnight into what they aren't happy with or whatever, because the dad's not happy with the son's not happy with the dad, and they switch roles. So it was kind of switching the roles for this guy, just within one person, of course, and that was interesting, very interesting.
Anything up in the future for you in terms of acting that you're allowed to talk about? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I had a fairly fun big day yesterday. I worked on the set of a new show coming out with Shamar Moore, who was in Criminal Minds.
Yep.
He has a new show this season, and got to work together we worked on a scene. He was in. I was the background detective, just kind of wandering around and looking important and busy. So, the detectives are, and yeah, that was fun. That was real fun. And I got to meet him after we wrapped the day and talked for a second, and he's a terrific guy. And then afterwards, I went to a thing last night, and Michael Rooker was doing actor Michael Rooker was doing a presentation talking about how it is to be an actor and that kind of thing. And he had some really fun, insightful things to share and thoughts about why he does it and what keeps him going about it.
Yeah, he was just in Guardians of the Galaxy too.
Yeah. But that and then there's a thing tomorrow I'm shooting on. It's a thing for it's a People magazine investigates, which is a TV series. I think kind of maybe like a 48 Hours mystery thing. But there was a thing I was in about 3 months ago that I know for certain is a 48 Hours type Dateline mystery show about real life crime called I Married a Murderer. And this producer reached out and wanted to cast me for this guy, the lead, a bad guy that did this story. And And it's kind of like, sure, it's a lead. Yeah, absolutely. And then he let me know about I was like, he's like, oh, by the way, and here's the guy's name, and if you want to look him up. And I was like, oh, okay. So, planned on meeting and booked for the shoot. And I looked up the guy's name after the call, and I'm like, what he did, and oh my God. I was like, I wanted to, I don't know, I had some concerns about, playing this guy who's, I played that guy. And, that's on that, I think it's on Netflix. It's called I Married a Murderer is the series. And so every episode is about a different crime that happened at some point in the nation's history. And
one more thing I want to mention, you two have gone to the conventions. Anything interesting you've seen there? Because I've never been outside New Brunswick here in Canada, so I always have to wonder what people have seen and what if somebody's doing a convention, I always ask them what the strangest thing they've ever signed was and whatnot. What have you two seen?
Kevin, what do you got, Kevin?
I don't know if I've seen anything too odd. I think more or less I'm always amazed at how many different booths have all of this original artwork for horror films. I'm always like, maybe I should pick that up for Sean. I think he'll like that. And just really cool items that people make. It's crazy.
Yeah, very, very creative stuff. These fans are very creative, and just to echo upon Kevin's sentiment there, we stopped by and met some of these very people at the in April at a horror convention.
Who blew your mind that you met?
I would have to say, go ahead, Kev.
Just to help you out there, buddy. No, I'm kidding. For me, when I got to meet Mr. Pinhead, that was awesome. And he's so tall, and I'm a really short guy. I'm only 5'4", and he's like 6 foot something. So I have this great picture, and I remember I was still a fanboy at the time, and I still am, but it was before I got heavily into making movies, and he had signed all my memorabilia. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. But Doug Bradley, he was,
yeah.
Doug was, because Kevin's a Hellraiser guy. That's Kevin's favorite.
I've never gotten anybody from the Hellraiser films on here yet. I've reached out to Doug, but so far, because that film's celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, but so far no peeps from any of that franchise. But had lots of Friday the 13th luck. I've done well with those.
I would say, I found out about some Hellraiser lore too. The book is way different than the movie, and I got informed on that, Kevin. So
yeah.
Oh yeah. But back to your question about who really stood out to me. I would have to say, all these people are very special.
Mm-hmm.
Betsy Palmer really stood out to me a lot.
You met Betsy.
Yeah, and she was at the 25th. There were so many people at this 25th anniversary thing that it was crazy. They were all people from the entire series were crammed in this little room in Hollywood and Highland, and it was just like, you're like a pinball in there. Like, there's this person, there's this person, there's just like, oh wow. I'd say there was no less than probably 40 to 50 alumni in there from the entire series. Yeah, I met Betsy, and Betsy was a fellow Hoosier. She was from East Chicago, Indiana, and I found out later. And I'm from northern Indiana, Fort Wayne, just literally right across the other side of the state, a couple of hours away. And when I met her, it was something about her mannerisms and just the way she talked and how nice she was. She was so sweet. It reminded me so much of my grandma Alice, because Grandma Alice is Hoosier. My whole family's from Indiana, and she. If you would have told me that this lady and she wasn't Betsy Palmer, but this lady was like my grandma's sister or cousin. I wouldn't have batted an eyelash. I would have believed it totally, because she just, there was something about her that was just very much, and maybe that was the Hoosier in her. I don't know. It was just a very very sweet, nice lady. And it was just very amazing to me that she was such a great psycho in part one. Like, she was such a great, like, villain. She did such a fantastic job, and very eerie, very. And I asked Kevin once about this. I was like, what's that about? Because I heard the same thing about Anthony Perkins, and he was such a nice guy. And I remember asking Kevin about this once. I was like, what's that about? It's like, what's these nice people? How do they do such great, psychos? And it's like, well, it's an easy break to go that way, because if your personality like closely mimics that, or you're not a nice person, then it's hard to separate and actually do the part. And I was like, remember you told me that, Kevin? I was like, yeah, that's great. That's great. That totally makes sense.
The nicest people make the awesomest bad guys.
There you go.
Totally.
Wow. So we're going to be looking forward to what did you say the name of your documentary is called?
The Friday the 13th Part 3 Memorium documentary.
Yes, in honor, of course, Richard Brooker, who played Jason in Friday the 13th Part 3, the one with the 3D, the first one with the hockey mask. And we're honoring his memory, of course, with this film, and lots of interesting interviews of people from the film, like Paul Kratka, Tracy Savage, Larry Zerner, David Katims, and of course others such as Adrian King, Harry Manfredini, and Caroline Williams as well. Lots of interesting people got to be part of this film. This is a documentary I would love to see, so I'm hoping. Will this come out on Blu-ray?
Right now the plans are, eventually we'd love to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Right now we're, just screening it for the premiere, and then maybe do some film festival runs.
Yeah. And
maybe get it some notoriety and accolades if possible. We'll see. Hopefully. That's the plans right now.
So have you screened it yet, or is it, or like screened it for anybody yet?
Well, I went in a few days ago, it was last week, about midweek, for the sound and video check at the theater, and it was it was fun.
Wow, it must be cool seeing your own work up there on the screen, huh?
Yeah, it's the sound and the picture, and it's great. It's nostalgic. It's a piece of nostalgia. It's a history piece.
Did you use
it's a preservation piece, trying to, and doing it in the, highest quality way possible. And yeah, it was great. It was it's great to see it up there.
So
awesome.
we are.
Thanks.
Yes, so we are celebrating, of course, Friday the 13th Part 3 35th anniversary with this awesome documentary, and I'm going to be bummed if we don't get that thing here. I'd actually like to see this, so it'll be perfect for somebody like myself who's grown up with the series like you two have, so perfect. Anything else you two want to plug before we close off?
No, not at the moment.
Well, I would say, I guess the plug I did earlier for Vincent DeSantis' Never Hike Alone, and because I got to be a part of that, and I was really grateful to after I saw the trailers, and check those out on YouTube too. I mean, they're just amazing. If you're in the Telluride, Colorado area on October 13th, to the film festival, I'd highly recommend it. It should be wonderful. So that's my plug.
Well,
And a big shout out to the other producers, Joe Quintanilla and Ruben Angelo, and of course Shannon.
absolutely,
Yeah.
definitely Shannon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give it, and definitely a
Yeah,
thanks to, everybody that had worked on this. I mean, everybody contributed. Everybody did, something to make this what it is, and and so I'm very grateful to everybody that worked on this project, and from the get go and through to now. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, before we close off, could I get you two to do a plug for my show?
Go
for it. Go for it, Kev. Go for it.
Oh, jeez. Let's see here. Let's see how many times I can butcher this. This is Kevin R. Phipps from the Friday the 13th, Part 3 In Memoriam documentary, supporting my man Greg Gilbert from Python's Paradise in New Brunswick, Canada.
Go for it, Sean.
All right. This is Sean Richards, executive producer for Friday the 13th, Part 3, the Memoriam documentary, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise in Canada.
Absolutely.
Much better than me.
Oh wait, I didn't say New Brunswick. I can do it one more time if you want.
Go for it.
All right. This is Sean Richards, executive producer of the Friday the 13th, Part 3, Memoriam documentary, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise in New Brunswick, Canada.